So no matter what you wear, no matter what you do, you get treated like a sexual object regardless, and your clothing is policed by the government. Wow, how nice. Hello, my good fellows, brethren and sisterin, probably more sisterin based on my analytics. Welcome to the video. I went down this rabbit hole. Okay, I went down this internet rabbit hole earlier this year about the male gaze in fashion, and I found it so interesting. And if you're like, what are you talking about? Basically, the male gaze, no, not that male gaze. The male gaze is the way that media and culture often present women from a male perspective, and it makes them objects of male pleasure and reinforces gender stereotypes. Okay, and basically it just informs, it shapes how women are judged, and it's really like focused on their looks, and it reinforces this idea that we only exist in the world through a male lens. And this is true for literature, art, movies, shows, whatever. But how this plays into fashion is a lot of times women feel pressured to dress in ways that are pleasing to men.
And for those 3 hours she spent getting ready, she only thought about one thing.
And less about what you like to wear. It's less about personal expression. Like, I don't know if you've ever felt like the things that you like to wear are things that men would find repulsive. Like, for example, my husband doesn't like white button-up shirts. I don't know what his beef is with it, and there's a specific material that he doesn't like, but I don't care, because to me, they're so chic and timeless. I love them. So I'm going to keep wearing them. Okay. So a lot of people have already made some great videos about this subject, so I'd recommend that you go watch those. But what I started thinking about when I was watching them was how I felt like when I grew up, I kind of had the opposite experience, the opposite side of the same coin. Like, I didn't necessarily dress to appeal to men. I got in trouble from male figures, whether it was family or teachers, for not being modest enough in their eyes, like not being covered enough for men. I don't know. I feel like I was still taught with the male gaze in mind to dress like that, but not so that they would look at me. It would be the opposite. So in today's video, I want to talk about who women dress for. Like whether modest fashion is about the male gaze, and if it's even possible to decenter men when thinking about how we dress. So to preface a little bit, I think that it's a normal part of growing up to care what boys think of you. I was watching this podcast episode with Emma Chamberlain, and she talks about how not being the girl that boys chose first, how that was a formative experience for her. And I think that's true for men too. Like, I'm sure the way that girls look at them, how women perceive them, really makes an impact on their life and the trajectory of their life. I think inherently there's probably a biological reason for us caring what the other gender thinks, and it's probably something to do with mating and reproducing.
Science.
But when I think about like my childhood or me as a young person, the first time that I remember like explicitly using the internet to understand how to make myself more palatable for men was when I was 13 years old. And I Googled, do boys like my hijab? What a stupid thing to Google. Like, I really needed some education, some insight on how to use the search engine optimizations tools. But anyway, I digress. That's not the point. I think my consciousness of how men see me started before that Google search. I also want to preface this by saying I'm not a scholar of religion. I'm not trying to make a statement about Islam or any other religion. I'm not like an expert on this. I'm just sharing my thoughts as me. So I'm not like making a ruling on what women are supposed to wear and not supposed to wear, okay? I'm just talking nonsense. I'm not nonsense. What I say matters. So first, let's define what is modest fashion. Well, modest fashion involves picking clothes that cover more of the body. They're less revealing, and it's often because of religion, culture, or just like personal values. I'm talking very broadly about modest fashion. I think a lot of times people think that people who show their hair are not included in this, and I feel like I don't always do a good job about emphasizing this, but like women who cover their hair are not the only modest dressers on the planet. It doesn't make a woman less Muslim, for example. It's just like this outwardly thing that's easy for people to put women into like a category or pass judgment on. But I think a lot of Muslim women that I know were raised to dress modestly, even if it's not a head covering, and that could have been cultural, religious, or both, but it's a thing. But the question still remains, because I take forever to answer question. Do religious women participate in modest fashion because of the male gaze? Well, if I'm being honest, I wasn't taught to cover up for any other reason except deterring the sexual attraction of men. At least like that's what I interpreted from it. Like I was taught shame over my body and like showing parts of my body, which I think to some level, like we're not nudists here, okay? So like it's not like that intense, but I do feel like that's kind of the perspective that I'm coming from. And again, I'm not just talking about the headscarf. Like I used to get, actually my parents didn't even care about my headscarf, but I used to get yelled at about the kind of jeans I was wearing or like the pants. And yes, I would say I was told it was a requirement by God probably at some point, but I feel like the other stuff was more ingrained in me personally. Like, yeah, it was the other stuff that was like, oh, this is shameful. Shameful, your butt is out. So yeah, and I think I come from a culture where it's very conservative. But I do notice, generally speaking, that I do get a level of respect and special treatment by other Muslim men that I've come across in the US, because I feel like they recognize you and then they put you in a specific category, whether that's right or wrong. I'm not commenting on that. That's not my point, but it does happen. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. But I will say, just because you dress modest doesn't guarantee you safety from perverts and violence. Like there's countless examples of it, and there's places in the world where like the culture is very conservative and sexual violence is still a thing. Yeah, I think sometimes people think that modesty means that like you just you dress that way and then you're protected from men. That's not necessarily true. I mean, like even with my hijab, I feel like I've caught people looking at me inappropriately, and then it's like hard to unsee that. Like I can't really be around the person anymore. I mean, I can, but that's like the thing in the back of my head. I'm like, okay, you were looking at my butt. But to be fair, I'm not like top tier on the modesty scale. Okay. I don't wear abaya. And for many years I wore like pants that were super tight and not very long shirts. So I don't know, like just take what I say with a grain of salt. And maybe you can let me know in the comments below if you do dress more conservative than me, like, you know, your experience. We'd love to hear that. But when you grow up this way, I feel like you're constantly in fear of the male gaze, and it dictates how you dress. Like it teaches you kind of to hate men and lose respect for them in an indirect way. Like you grow up with this idea that it's all on you. You are completely and totally responsible for the bad behavior of other men. And like they're just these beasts who can't control themselves. And it teaches you misandry basically. Because like if you see someone as a beast, they're scary, which creates fear, which creates not love. But if dressing modestly is more at its core about God consciousness, and it's something that, you know, should be reminding you of God, then it also reminds other people of God. And then it identifies you as something, like whatever religion or practice it is, whatever it may be. And I feel like if that's truly the case and that's the core of it, then it shouldn't really be about the male gaze. Or maybe, yeah, I don't know. Like, why is there not more of an emphasis for the other gender? Like, why don't men grow up with that fear of like, oh, they saw my upper thigh. Men don't grow up with that fear of being sexualized, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, those are my thoughts on like modest fashion and the male gaze. But then also, on the other hand, is non-modest fashion for the male gaze, because we're also kind of taught that, right? Like on the other end of the spectrum, with more revealing clothing and more hyper feminine, maybe fitted dresses, high heel swimsuits. I feel like I grew up in a time in the US where it was a little bit more explicit. You know, women were wearing things that were explicitly for the male gaze. Like it was really hard to dress modestly in that time and find clothes that were more modest. I felt like media was very much dictated and centered around how to get men to like you, approve of you. And then of course that trickled down into fashion. Like I knew men who would watch the Victoria's Secret fashion show, which is like, that's so odd. And when I think of like the Swimsuit Illustrated, is that a magazine for women? I don't know. And there were just so many Hollywood films and commercials, like Megan Fox and Transformers, Carl Jr. ad, like they were so extra sexualized. And as a woman, I can tell you that it's so clear to me that that's not a woman's vision of what we are. Like those were so clearly the male gaze. Yeah, when you watch stuff and you're just like, these female characters have no depth and they're just like objects of male desire, it's just so obvious. Right. And so, of course, that influences the way that women dress in that time. And I'm talking like maybe the early 2000s. And I feel like now, even if we talk about now, I don't want to just say then, we still have like all these stupid debates and podcasts and like, I'm sorry, but like shit content, okay? Really like low level intellectual stuff, talking about being more feminine, trad wives, you know, high value women, like all this bakwas. It's brain rot. And I feel like I see this in the mainstream, like social media, and then it trickles down into Muslim social media. And it's so odd because it feels like women only exist through the male's lens, and we just constantly debate about what the standard should be. And it's almost like it's not even enough. Like some of these guys are so odd, like saying that women shouldn't be on social media and that they shouldn't wear jackets or coats on their abayas. Like, what is wrong with you? Like I feel like you're embarrassing yourself with like how odd you are. Like you just want women to disappear from public spaces. Like just say it outright. There are countries in this world where you'll be satisfied, so you can just pack your bags and go there, and you know, stop making like our ears bleed with this shit. Like it's just so stupid. I do have a problem with it because I'm like, we don't just exist because of you. Like we can have our own social media, our own spheres, our own stuff that we develop for ourselves. Even when someone comments on like my hair showing here or whatever, I'm like, you don't have to watch my videos. Like why? And no offense, but if you're that religious where this bothers you that much and you're a man, why are you watching my videos? Like it's not necessary to watch my videos. There's a million other people you can watch. But I've also seen something on social media. Sometimes TikToks will come where I feel like there are women who have expressed that they started to dress more modestly to deter the male gaze, and it makes them feel better in general. And if that at the end of the day, you know, you're choosing clothes based on how men make you feel, I don't know, it just sucks. Like it's unfortunate, but I don't blame those women, and I don't blame anybody, to be honest. I just feel like, where do we go from here? I mean, personally, I think in the world we live in, it's impossible to decenter men and completely be like, oh, it doesn't matter like what they think or how they see us, because that's just not true. Like it can be true in your world. You can make that your world, but generally speaking, and maybe some people have been able to do that, but I do think it depends where you live, what culture you're in. The context definitely matters. And when it comes to fashion, I think you should dress how you want to. You know, if your beliefs are that you want to dress more modestly, that should come from you and not from this feeling that you're ashamed of yourself or always being conscious of how men see you. And even without modesty, I think it's cool to see fashion through the female gaze. I think I have never been like over the moon if a man compliments my outfit. Okay, if a woman, no matter how fashionable or unfashionable she is, if she compliments me, I'm like, wow, like my day is made, right? Because I really value the female fashion gaze eyes. Okay, I just appreciate it. Well, anyways, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Yeah, again, I'm not trying to make this is not a fatwa or something. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and we will we'll see each other soon. I'll see you soon. Okay, all right, goodbye. TazzyPhe out. Bye.